just gonna
Stand for a little bit.
Yes, I'm ready.
I'm
Okay,
nervous.
we're going.
I'm nervous.
You're nervous.
I'm nervous.
All right, are we ready?
Yes.
We're recording?
Yes, we're
Check,
recording.
check. Okay, we're good to go. Awesome, thank you folks very much for showing up today. This is for my technical presentation skills class at the University of North Texas, Beauty and the Beer. I think it's awesome, by the way, that everybody showed up here to talk about beer and you're not at home watching the Olympics. So today we are going to talk a little bit about myself. We're going to talk a little bit about women in craft beer, and then we're going to go over the basics of home brewing. So, oh, forgot about that one guy. So anyway, what by chance happened to be your first craft beer?
I think Shiner for me.
Boulevard Wheat, probably.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
What about you, Ben?
Sean.
Shiner? All right.
Coors.
I'm not sure if that quite qualifies as craft beer, but we'll go with it. So for me, my first craft beer, I remember it actually strangely well. I was 17 years old playing Dungeons and Dragons with a couple of old friends of mine, and my friend Mikey happened to hand me a cherry wheat. The only thing I had tried prior to that was my dad's Natural Light, so I thought I didn't like beer, but you know, Mike pushed me into it, and being young and impressionable, I gave it a try. I thought it was pretty dang awesome, by the way. It's good stuff. A couple of years later, I happened to enlist in the military. That's actually me, October 2001, graduating basic training. Funny thing about the military, by the way, it's very hard to hide certain things. Certain things don't stay secret. One of those happens to be your 21st birthday. I turned 21 on May 4th, 2002. My unit happened to find out about it and drag me out to drink, because it's what you do when you're in the military. And my commander at the time bought me my very first Guinness. So that was my first Guinness. Loved it. Loved that coffee stuff. And, you know, obviously still like beer today. A couple of years later, the military was gracious enough to station me in Germany. That's Castle Neuschwanstein in the background over in the Bavarian region of Germany. Beautiful, beautiful country. Anyway, that's to tell a little bit about me and how I got into craft beer. It's an amazing thing. It's good stuff. And when I tell people that I brew, sometimes they kind of look at me, and it's getting less and less. It's because women in beer is getting more prevalent now. But nonetheless, I sometimes get stopped to go, wait, isn't that a thing that guys do? And, well, yeah, kind of. But, you know, chicks or women are doing great in it. They're forming some awesome careers. And me, having been in the military, I'm all about women power and women being pioneers and making their way through things. If you could go ahead and hit play, please.
Oh,
Did it?
1 second.
Anyway. Well, they're in it, they're rocking it, they're brewing, it's good stuff. You can go ahead and stop it now. Are we back? Okay, cool. So yeah, anyway, they're really, they're really some awesome trailblazers in the community. Anybody here a fan of Blue Moon or Fat Tire? Okay, we got at least two, three of you in here. Okay,
Fire's
4.
good.
Awesome, okay. Oh shoot, that was the wrong slide. Okay. Well, since I did that, we'll just do this. By the way, New Belgium Brewing makes both of those beers. And this wonderful lady here is Kim Jordan. She is the CEO and co-founder of New Belgium Brewing. To go back to what I accidentally skipped. This here, there are a couple of organizations out there about women in brewing. This one here is the Pink Boot Society. This is actually a professional organization, but they one of the things they do is they raise money for scholarships for women to further their careers in the brewing industry. This over here, please forgive me, I didn't pick the name. This is Bitch Beer. This is one of Austin's top 10 food and beverage blogs, by the way. They are trying to recoin the term to be a more, to have a much more positive effect and to bring about the fact that anybody can enjoy beer, women included. It's not, it's not about always being, soft, fruity, or light beer. Women can enjoy the good stuff. I'd say the good stuff. Women can enjoy craft beer too. So we just talked about Kim Jordan. This lady here, this is Christine Sella. She is the founder of Flemish Fox Brewing and Craft Works. Her father, by the way, she's a native of Belgium. Are anybody here familiar with the brew Hoegaarden? Hoegaarden,
Hoegaarden,
okay. Yeah, currently owned by Anheuser-Busch. That was her father that developed the recipe and everything. And it was interesting when they were when they chose to move to the States, her father went around the United States trying to find the perfect spot. And they ended up picking Austin, Texas, of all places, because the water there was similar to water in Belgium. That way they could continue to brew in the Belgian style and still get, a similar, if not exact, flavor out of what he was doing. She is currently, bringing more Belgian styles to the Austin area. This wonderful lady actually emailed me. She was very, very kind. This is Jackie Harmon. She's a brewer over at Karbach Brewery. And one of the comments that she said in her email, what's great about home brewing is that that's where people get to experiment. So they get to have fun, where they can, actually sit around and experiment and make, get creative with whatever it is that they're brewing. Karbach Brewery actually does a competition, I think, every quarter, and of home brewers, and whoever wins, Karbach will actually brew that particular recipe. So yeah, it's a fun way to help expand and come up with new ideas. Now moving on to what I think most of us are actually here for. This is the basics of brewing. Don't be overwhelmed by this slide and all the equipment. I actually have a list. I have a list of everything over here for everybody to take home if you'd like. But no, this is a basic idea. You got your wort chiller, you got your carboy, you got your brewing kettle, you've got your malts, grains. These are probably hops. That's probably a yeast, funnel. So anyway, you get the picture. But yeah, like any hobby, you do have an initial investment of equipment, and you are going to need it. Brewing can basically be broken down into 3 steps. You got your brew day, fermentation, your bottling day, and I guess I should have added a 4th, drinking it. Didn't think about that. Should have added that. So here you go. The basic steps of brewing. First thing you're going to do, you're going to soak. First thing you're going to do, you're going to steep your grains to get to release the sugars. After you do that, you're going to boil the solution and add the hops for flavoring. At that point, you will then cool your wort and add the yeast. For about 2 weeks is when fermentation goes on for about 2 weeks, where the yeast breaks it down into, it breaks the sugars down into carbon dioxide and our good old friend alcohol. And when the main fermentation is complete, you then, you bottle, you add some sugars to it to help carbonate the beer. Then you siphon, into the bottles to provide the carbonation. Those are the basic steps of what you're going to do. It sounds more complicated than what it really is. So very first thing you got to do on brew day, you got to clean and you got to sanitize. You can cleanse ahead of time, but you definitely want to sanitize day of. There's all kinds of dust and particles in the air that could get stuck in there. So you want to definitely sanitize shortly before actually starting your brew. One thing that Travis and I found exceptionally helpful, he's my husband, one thing that we found exceptionally helpful is this step. This is a 1-step sanitizer that rinses more clean, so you don't have to worry about soap getting stuck in your beer, because the soap can bad flavors, kill the yeast. You don't want soap in your beer. That and soap can make you sick. So we found this step exceptionally helpful when we brew. I know other brewers do other methods. This is just what we happen to do. So you're going to start off by making your wort. and it's gonna all go into a kettle, very similar to that right there. You might have a different one, but that's our brew kettle. So you have your water, and you're gonna steep your grains. And you think of it kind of like steeping tea. Okay. Sorry, think of it kind of like steeping tea. You don't necessarily want to steep it too long. You know, kind of like when you steep your tea, you steep it too long, it gets kind of funky, doesn't taste all that great. Similar thing here, you don't want to steep it too terribly long. Shoot, how long do you usually do that? About half an hour? Yeah, you want to steep for about half an hour. Do you have any wine drinkers in the crowd today? Okay, a couple wine drinkers. What kind of wine do you like?
What's it called? Cabs or Pinot Noirs right
Okay.
now.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was hoping for. So, certain wines are very high in tannic acid or tannins. That's what gives that really dry flavor at the end of it. It's great in certain wines. You don't want it so much in your beer. So when you start steeping your grains, you want to keep it under 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything above that, you're going to start leaching tannins, and you're going to get some bad flavors in there. Another thing to think about is your water when you start brewing. If you have especially hard water, you're going to have a rough time. All that extra stuff in your water is going to also, unfortunately, leach out some more tannins. So we buy the spring water when we go to the store when we decide to brew. That's how we get around it. Anyway, no tannins. You want to avoid those. So that's what we start with. You steep the grains for about half an hour. Next thing you do is you start adding your malt extract. Malt extract comes in a couple different forms. Sometimes it's dry, sometimes it's, they call it liquid. This stuff is thicker than molasses, by the way. But yeah, anyway, next thing you'll do is you'll add your malt extract, and then, you add your malt extract, and then you bring it to a boil. Is that right? Yeah, bring it to a boil. And the malt extract. So once you bring it to a boil, it's going to be about an hour total that you boil at this point. So you'll add your bittering hops, and then you're going to boil for about an hour. All this occurring inside your brew kettle. Our heat source, we like to use a turkey fryer. Some people do a stove. It's just whatever personal preference, what happens works best for you. About 15 minutes before the end of the boil, if you're going to add any of your finishing hops, usually they're more aromatic, you would add that about 15 minutes before the boil. And if you want to clarify your beer, about 15 minutes before, you also want to add this thing called Irish moss. It just helps give you a clearer, more finished-looking product in the end. Once you're done with your hour, once you're done at about an hour, it's my poor husband, he's modeling for me. When you're done with your boil, you're going to want to start to cool the wort, and you want to get it down to about 65 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Really, I think you should get it more down to at least 80 if you can. And I've seen many different methods of doing this. Some people do a tub full of, try and do a tub full of ice. They'll set the kettle inside that, try to get it cool down. Honestly, this thing is called a wort chiller. This will save you a ton of time. It's a bit of an investment initially, but it's well worth it. It'll save you a ton of time. You hook up one side to your hose, turn on the cold water. It'll siphon through the copper here and come out the other side. But this is a huge help in reducing your brew day time. Next step is fermentation. So we say that dogs are man's best friend. I would strongly argue yeast is man's second best friend. We've been depending on yeast to ferment beer, wine, and other alcoholic beverages for hundreds of years. It's pretty cool stuff. Anyway, once you got the wort cooled down is the step where you will pitch the yeast. And you'll put the yeast inside of a fermentation bucket. It might look something similar to this. So the yeast will go in there. And at that point, you'll transfer the chilled wort into your fermentation bucket, along with any additional water that you need. This is actually concentrated. When you siphon, you're going to want to siphon the wort out. There's going to be some sludge and stuff at the bottom, your leftover hops and stuff. It's all going to be down there. If you use we have this thing, the auto siphon. This will help filter out any of that junk that you don't want. So that will help, get some of the sediment out of there before you go and ferment. So there's that part. Once you've done that, close up your bucket, add your airlock, and sit in a cool, dry place for 2 weeks. And it needs to go a full 2 weeks. And you want to keep it down to about 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Anyway, when you first do this, like the first couple of days, you'll usually see a bunch of bubbling and stuff occur inside your airlock. That's the CO2 releasing while it's, that's the CO2 that the yeast is making while it's releasing. Anyway, where's I going with that? Anyway, that's the CO2. That will usually stop well before fermentation is actually complete. So if it goes still, that does not mean the fermentation is done. You need to let it sit for a full 2 weeks. Trust me, I know it's hard to do. You get impatient, you really want to get that beer, but you need to let it sit for that full 2 weeks. So next step is bottling. Again, clean and sanitize. It's kind of hard to see. We've got this tree here we use to dry them with. They have various tools that will help you clean the inside of the bottles. But again, clean and sanitize, including the caps, all that good stuff. So you will, when you get to this step, first thing you're going to do is you're going to prepare your priming sugar. You take your sugar, you add it to some water, you bring it to a boil, then you let it cool off. Then you're going to add that priming sugar to your wort before bottling. Get it all mixed up. This is some extra sugar that the yeast can nom on so that it can carbonate your beer. After that, you'll siphon the beer into the bottles. You'll use some type of a capper, put them in a cool, dry place, and then put them in a cool, dry place again for another 2 weeks so they can fully carbonate. And then guess what? It's ready to drink. Any questions?
When do we drink it?
Is 2 weeks always the amount of time, or does it depend on the kind of beer that you're brewing?
For fermentation, it's pretty much 2 weeks is pretty standard for the fermentation stage.
Okay, so does it also vary when you bottle it too? Like I said, depending on if it's a dark beer or a light beer or something?
No, that seems to be the standard. I'm going a lot off of John Palmer's book, How to Brew. And that seems to be kind of the standard. Yeast can do, different strains of yeast can do some different things. Different strains of yeast can sometimes boost your alcohol content. They can make your beer a little more sweet depending on what type it is. But as for the time, pretty much 2 weeks to ferment and 2 weeks for it to carbonate is pretty standard. I haven't seen much deviation there.
So you went to my next question, does yeast make a difference? We all know,
Yes.
a lot of us know that the hops and all that stuff
Right.
make a big difference. That the yeast does too?
Yes, there are probably hundreds of different strains of yeast. When we go to the brew store to pick, there's many times we'll just flat out ask who's working at the brew store, what do you recommend for this type of beer? Like most recent, our recent brew, the one downstairs that you probably saw, we're making an Oktoberfest, and we asked him, since we're not set up for lagering, we're an ale shop. We just do ales. We asked him, since we're not lagering for an Oktoberfest, what type of yeast would you recommend? And he recommended one to us. And so, yeah, yeast can make a big difference depending on what it is. So. Any other questions? All right. Well, I have to say a couple of thank yous. I got to thank Ben Easley with the Bearded Monk, as well as Crystal McIntyre, Dennis Wood over at Barron's Brew Works. He was also very helpful. I emailed and talked to Rabbit Hole Brewery, and they recommended me to go to howtobrew.com. John Palmer's book that I just mentioned earlier is all published right here for anybody to go view and take a look. And, there's a speaker that I really admire, and his way of closing a presentation, he always shows a picture of a puppy. I, on the other hand, have to let my nerd out. Thank you all very, very much. Welcome to the dark side. May the brew be with you.